Captain Sarah Chen stood barely 5 feet 2 inches tall in her flight boots, but her shadow stretched long across the tarmac as the morning sun climbed over Edwards Air Force Base. At 28 years old, she had already earned more flight hours than pilots twice her age, yet she still heard the whispers, the same whispers that had followed her through every stage of her military career. She's too small for the F-22 controls. How can someone that tiny handle 9 Gs? The ejection seat wasn't designed for someone her size. Sarah had heard them all. She had also proven them all wrong, one flight at a time. But today felt different. Today, the whispers carried more weight, because today she was finally getting her shot at something she had worked toward for 8 years. The daughter of a Korean immigrant mother and Irish-American father, Sarah had grown up in a small town in Montana where the biggest excitement was the annual county fair. Her father, Michael Chen, had been a crop duster pilot who taught her to fly in an old Cessna 150 when she was just 14. Her mother, Jin Ai, had worked double shifts at the local hospital as a nurse to help pay for Sarah's flight lessons. "Size doesn't matter in the cockpit," her father had told her during one of their early lessons. "What matters is how well you can think, how fast you can react, and how much heart you put into it." Those words had carried Sarah through 4 years at the Air Force Academy, where she graduated second in her class. They had carried her through pilot training, where she finished first. They had carried her through every assignment that followed, each one a stepping stone toward her ultimate goal, flying the most advanced fighter jet in the world. The F-22 Raptor stood before her now, its angular stealth design making it look like something from a science fiction movie. At 62 feet long with a wingspan of 44 feet, the aircraft dwarfed Sarah's small frame. But she knew every rivet, every system, every capability of this machine. She had spent the last 2 years studying it, training on simulators, and waiting for her chance. Colonel Marcus Rodriguez, her squadron commander, approached across the tarmac. At 6 feet 4 inches tall, he towered over Sarah, but his expression showed nothing but respect. Rodriguez had been one of the few officers who had never questioned her abilities based on her size. "Chen, you ready for this?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had flown combat missions in 3 different conflicts. "More than ready, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the excitement building in her chest. Rodriguez nodded. "I've reviewed your training scores again. Perfect marks across the board. But you know there are still people in Washington who have concerns." Sarah did know. The concerns weren't about her flying ability or her tactical knowledge. They were about optics. The Air Force had invested billions in the F-22 program, and some officials worried about the image of their most advanced fighter being flown by someone who looked like she should be teaching elementary school rather than engaging enemy aircraft. "With respect, sir, let them have their concerns," Sarah said. "I'll let my performance speak for itself." What Rodriguez didn't tell Sarah was that her assignment to the F-22 program had taken a direct intervention from General Patricia Hayes, the highest-ranking woman in the Air Force. Hayes had reviewed Sarah's record personally and had made it clear that any attempt to pass her over based on physical appearance would result in serious consequences for whoever made that decision. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. During her initial pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas, she had faced her first real challenge with aircraft designed for larger pilots. The T-6 Texan trainer aircraft had controls positioned for someone with longer arms and legs. Sarah had to adjust her seat position in ways that technically violated standard procedures, but her instructor, Captain David Kim, had worked with her to find solutions. "Every pilot has to adapt to their aircraft," Kim had told her. "The difference is, you're having to be more creative about it." Sarah had learned to use small pillows behind her back to reach the rudder pedals properly. She had developed techniques for reaching overhead switches that other pilots took for granted. Most importantly, she had learned to use her smaller size as an advantage. She could tolerate higher G-forces better than larger pilots because she had less body mass to fight against. She could fit into tighter spaces for maintenance work. She could remain comfortable in the cockpit during longer missions when bigger pilots were struggling with cramped conditions. After pilot training, Sarah had been assigned to fly F-16 Fighting Falcons with the 388th Fighter Wing at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. The F-16 had been a better fit for her size, and she had quickly established herself as one of the best pilots in the squadron. Her small hands could manipulate the aircraft's controls with a precision that amazed her colleagues. Her quick reflexes, honed by years of adapting to equipment not designed for her, gave her an edge in combat maneuvers. Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's first squadron commander, had been impressed by her abilities, but had also been protective of her career path. Walsh knew that the military could be an unforgiving environment for anyone who didn't fit the traditional mold. "You're going to have to be twice as good as everyone else," Walsh had told Sarah during one of their mentoring sessions. "It's not fair, but it's reality. The good news is, you already are twice as good." Sarah had proven Walsh right during her deployment to Afghanistan in 2021. Flying close air support missions over the mountainous terrain, she had provided cover for ground troops in some of the most dangerous areas of the country. Her ability to fly low and precise patterns through mountain valleys had saved countless lives. She had received the Distinguished Flying Cross for her actions during one particular mission where she had single-handedly held off enemy forces while a medical evacuation helicopter extracted wounded soldiers. But it was her performance during a training exercise in Nevada that had finally caught the attention of the F-22 program. Sarah had been serving as an aggressor pilot, playing the role of enemy aircraft against F-22s in simulated combat. In one exercise, she had managed to outmaneuver two F-22 pilots using tactics that took advantage of her F-16's smaller radar signature and her own exceptional flying skills. The F-22 pilots had been embarrassed, but their squadron commander, Colonel Rodriguez, had been intrigued. He had requested Sarah's personnel file and had been impressed by what he found. When an opening came up in his squadron, he had specifically requested her transfer. "I don't care if she's 5 feet tall or 7 feet tall," Rodriguez had told his superiors. "She can fly better than most of my current pilots, and she has the tactical knowledge to maximize the F-22's capabilities." The transfer had not been without controversy. Some members of Congress had questioned the decision when it was briefed during a closed-door session on military readiness. The concerns weren't openly about gender or size, but everyone in the room understood the subtext. General Hayes had addressed the concerns directly. "Captain Chen has earned this assignment through merit and performance. If we start making decisions based on appearance rather than capability, we undermine everything our military stands for." Now standing next to the F-22 on this clear morning in California, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her here. Every challenge had made her stronger. Every doubt had motivated her to prove herself again. Every setback had taught her something new about herself and her capabilities. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Tony Valdez, approached with her flight helmet and gear. Valdez was a 20-year veteran who had worked on fighter aircraft around the world. He had initially been skeptical about working with Sarah, but her professionalism and knowledge had quickly won him over. "Aircraft's ready, Captain," Valdez reported. "All systems green. Weather's perfect for flying." Sarah took her helmet and began her pre-flight inspection. She walked around the aircraft, checking every external component with the thoroughness that had become her trademark. Other pilots sometimes rushed through their pre-flight checks, but Sarah had learned early that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. As she climbed the ladder to the cockpit, Sarah noticed a small crowd of people watching from the operations building. Some were fellow pilots, curious to see how she would handle her first F-22 flight. Others were officials from Washington, still concerned about their investment in the program. A few were reporters who had somehow learned about the first woman to be assigned to fly the Air Force's most advanced fighter. The cockpit of the F-22 was like stepping into the future. Digital displays showed every piece of information a pilot could need. The controls were laid out with an efficiency that reflected decades of development. But for all its advanced technology, the aircraft still required a human pilot to make it truly effective. Sarah strapped herself in, adjusting the seat and harness to accommodate her smaller frame. She had practiced this routine dozens of times in the simulator, but sitting in the actual aircraft was different. The responsibility felt heavier. The expectations felt more intense. "Tower, Raptor 1, requesting permission for taxi," Sarah radioed. "Raptor 1, cleared to taxi to runway 27. Wind calm, visibility unlimited." As Sarah taxied the powerful fighter toward the runway, she thought about all the people who had helped her reach this moment. Her parents, who had sacrificed to give her opportunities. Her instructors, who had seen her potential when others saw only limitations. Her fellow pilots, who had accepted her as an equal when it would have been easier to shut her out. But mostly, she thought about the young girls who might be watching the news coverage of her flight. Girls who had been told they were too small, too weak, or too different to pursue their dreams. She wanted them to see that those limitations were often just other people's lack of imagination. "Raptor 1, cleared for takeoff," came the voice from the control tower. Sarah advanced the throttles, feeling the incredible power of the F-22's twin engines pushing her back into her seat. The aircraft accelerated down the runway faster than anything she had ever flown before. At 180 miles per hour, she pulled back on the stick, and the Raptor leaped into the sky with an authority that took her breath away. As the ground fell away beneath her, Sarah felt a mixture of triumph and anticipation. She had finally made it to where she wanted to be. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The real tests were still ahead of her. The real challenges were still waiting. What she didn't know was that those challenges would come sooner than anyone expected, and they would test not just her flying skills, but everything she had learned about courage, determination, and proving that size truly doesn't matter when it comes to the size of someone's heart. 6 months after her first F-22 flight, Captain Sarah Chen had become one of the most proficient Raptor pilots in the Air Force. Her small size, once seen as a disadvantage, had proven to be an asset in ways no one had anticipated. She could withstand higher G-forces during aggressive maneuvers. Her precise hand movements made her exceptionally accurate with weapon systems, and her ability to remain comfortable during long flights gave her an endurance advantage over larger pilots. The morning of March 15th started like any other at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. Sarah was scheduled for a routine training flight with her wingman, Captain Jake Morrison, a 6-foot-tall former college football player who had initially been skeptical of flying with someone half his size. That skepticism had disappeared after their first training exercise together, when Sarah had outmaneuvered him in ways that made him question everything he thought he knew about aerial combat. "Chen, you ready to embarrass me again today?" Morrison asked as they walked toward their aircraft in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah smiled. "I don't try to embarrass anyone, Jake. I just fly the way my dad taught me." What neither pilot knew was that their routine training flight was about to become anything but routine. At 0347 hours, radar stations along the Aleutian Islands had detected something unusual. Multiple aircraft were approaching Alaskan airspace from the west, flying in a pattern that suggested they were not commercial traffic. Colonel Rodriguez was awakened by a call from the North American Aerospace Defense Command. The voice on the other end was tense but professional. "Colonel, we have a developing situation. Multiple unidentified aircraft approaching from the west. They're not responding to radio calls, and their flight pattern suggests hostile intent." Rodriguez was immediately alert. "How many aircraft?" 14 confirmed, possibly more. They appear to be advanced fighter jets, possibly stealth technology. Sir, they're moving fast and heading directly toward our airspace." The situation was unprecedented. For years, there had been occasional incursions by foreign aircraft testing American responses, but nothing on this scale. 14 advanced fighters represented a significant threat that required an immediate response. Rodriguez quickly ran through his available options. Most of his squadron was down for maintenance or training. He had only 4 F-22s immediately available for launch, and 2 of those were scheduled for Sarah and Morrison's training flight. "Get Chen and Morrison airborne immediately," Rodriguez ordered his operations officer. "Vector them toward the incoming aircraft. I'll get the other 2 birds launching as backup." Within minutes, Sarah and Morrison were being briefed on the developing situation. The threat was unlike anything either pilot had faced in training. 14 unknown aircraft, possibly equipped with stealth technology, approaching at high speed with unknown intentions. "Your orders are to intercept and identify," the briefing officer explained. "If they prove hostile, you are cleared to engage. But remember, this could spark an international incident, so every decision you make will be scrutinized." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but her training took over. She had prepared for this moment through hundreds of hours of simulation and study. The difference was that now, lives potentially hung in the balance. As Sarah and Morrison launched into the pre-dawn sky, the weight of the situation settled over them. They were flying the most advanced fighters in the world, but they were outnumbered 7-1. Success would depend on superior tactics, training, and the technological advantages of the F-22. "Raptor Flight, this is Control," came the voice over their radios. "Bogies are bearing 270, range 100 miles and closing. They're flying at 30,000 feet, speed 600 knots. Sarah checked her radar display. The incoming aircraft were flying in a tight formation that suggested military training. Their approach pattern was aggressive, designed to penetrate American airspace quickly and deeply. "Jake, what's your assessment?" Sarah asked over the encrypted radio channel. Morrison studied his displays. "They're flying like they own the place. Either they're incredibly confident or they don't know we're here yet. Or they know exactly what they're doing and they're testing our response," Sarah replied. "Let's assume they're professionals and act accordingly." The F-22's stealth capabilities meant that the approaching aircraft likely could not detect Sarah and Morrison on radar. This gave them a significant tactical advantage, but it also meant they would have to be careful about how they revealed themselves. "Raptor Flight, you are cleared to close for visual identification," Control radioed. "Rules of engagement are weapons tight unless fired upon." Sarah adjusted her course to intercept the incoming formation. As they closed the distance, her radar began picking up more details about the aircraft. They were definitely military jets, and their configuration suggested they were capable of both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions. "Contact, bearing 285, range 40 miles, Sarah reported. "Multiple aircraft in formation. Appears to be 2 flights of 7 aircraft each." The tactical situation was becoming clearer. 14 aircraft in formation suggested a coordinated mission, not a navigation error or training exercise that had wandered into American airspace. The approaching pilots knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. At 20 miles, Sarah got her first visual contact with the lead aircraft. What she saw made her blood run cold. The aircraft were advanced fighters with a design she didn't immediately recognize, but their aggressive posture and weapons configuration left no doubt about their intentions. "Control. Raptor 1 has visual on the bogies. Counting 14 aircraft, unknown type, armed and in attack formation. Request instructions." There was a pause from Control. Then Colonel Rodriguez's voice came over the radio. "Raptor Flight, you are cleared to engage if they cross into our airspace or show hostile intent. Backup is launching now, but you're going to be alone for the next 15 minutes. Sarah looked at her tactical display. The aircraft were just minutes from crossing into American airspace, and their formation suggested they were planning to split up and attack multiple targets once they crossed the border. "Jake, they're going to scatter the moment they cross the line," Sarah observed. "If we wait until then, we'll never catch them all." Morrison understood the implication. "So, what are you thinking?" Sarah had been analyzing the tactical situation, drawing on years of training and natural instincts that had made her exceptional in air-to-air combat. The approaching formation was following classic doctrine for penetrating enemy airspace, but that predictability could be used against them. "They don't know we're here," Sarah said. "We can position ourselves to attack their formation from two directions simultaneously. If we time it right, we can disrupt their entire plan before they reach our airspace." It was an aggressive strategy that required precise timing and flawless execution, but as Sarah ran the scenarios in her mind, she realized it might be their only chance to prevent the incoming aircraft from achieving their objectives. "Raptor flight. The bogies have just crossed into American territorial waters," Control reported. "You are cleared to engage." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline as the situation transitioned from intercept to combat. Everything she had trained for, every simulation she had flown, every lesson she had learned, was about to be put to the ultimate test. "Jake, take the northern formation. I'll handle the southern group," Sarah commanded. "We hit them fast and hard before they know what happened." Morrison acknowledged and began positioning himself for his attack run. Sarah advanced her throttles, feeling the F-22's powerful engines push her toward her targets at nearly twice the speed of sound. The approaching aircraft maintained their formation, apparently unaware that two American fighters were closing in on them with lethal intent. Sarah could see them clearly now on her targeting display, their heat signatures bright against the cold Alaskan sky. "Raptor 1, engaging," Sarah radioed as she armed her weapons systems. The lead enemy aircraft was now within range of her AIM-120 air-to-air missiles. Sarah locked onto her first target, watching the targeting symbol turn from yellow to red as the missile guidance system achieved a firing solution. "Fox 3, Sarah called out, using the standard radio call for launching a radar-guided missile. The first missile streaked away from Sarah's aircraft, its exhaust trail visible in the dim morning light. At the same time, Morrison launched his own missile at the northern formation. Both missiles found their targets within seconds of each other. Two of the enemy aircraft erupted in balls of fire, their debris falling toward the ocean below. The remaining aircraft immediately scattered, their tight formations breaking apart as pilots realized they were under attack. But Sarah had anticipated this response. As the enemy aircraft scattered, she was already maneuvering to engage her second target. Her smaller size allowed her to handle the extreme G-forces of aggressive maneuvering better than larger pilots, giving her an advantage in the close-quarters combat that was about to unfold. The enemy pilots were skilled and their aircraft were capable, but they had been caught completely by surprise. Sarah's training and tactical knowledge were about to be tested in ways she had never imagined, as 12 remaining enemy aircraft tried to complete their mission while avoiding destruction by two American pilots who refused to let them pass. "Raptor 2. I'm engaged with multiple targets," Morrison reported, his voice strained by the G-forces of combat maneuvering. Sarah was already lining up her second shot. The enemy aircraft were turning toward the coast, still attempting to reach their original targets despite the ambush. Her radar showed multiple threats, but her training had taught her to prioritize targets based on their immediate danger. "Stay focused, Jake," Sarah replied. "We've got this." What followed would become one of the most extraordinary displays of aerial combat skill in modern military history, as a pilot once told she was too small for fighter controls, prepared to prove that heart and skill mattered more than physical size. The aerial battlefield above the Aleutian Islands had become a deadly chess match played at supersonic speeds. With two enemy aircraft already destroyed, 12 remained, and they were no longer flying in predictable formations. The element of surprise was gone, and Sarah Chen found herself in the most challenging combat situation any pilot could face. outnumbered 6-1 against skilled opponents flying advanced aircraft. "Raptor 2, I'm defensive," Morrison radioed, his voice tight with concentration as he tried to evade two enemy fighters that had turned to engage him. Sarah quickly assessed the tactical situation. The enemy aircraft had split into 3 groups of 4, with one group pursuing Morrison, another heading toward the Alaskan coast, and the third maneuvering to attack her. It was a textbook response to an ambush, but Sarah had studied textbooks from many different air forces during her years of preparation. "Jake, break left and dive," Sarah commanded. "I'm coming to support." What happened next would be analyzed in military academies for years to come. Sarah Chen, the pilot who had been told she was too small for fighter controls, began a display of aerial combat mastery that defied conventional wisdom about air-to-air warfare. The 4 enemy aircraft approaching her position were flying in a finger 4 formation, a classic fighter arrangement that allowed mutual support while maintaining tactical flexibility. But Sarah had spent countless hours studying the strengths and weaknesses of different formations, and she knew exactly how to exploit them. Instead of turning to meet the approaching fighters head-on, Sarah rolled her F-22 inverted and dove toward the ocean, building speed while positioning herself below the enemy formation. Her smaller size meant she could handle the G-forces of the steep dive better than most pilots, and her understanding of energy management in air combat was exceptional. "Raptor 1, you're going straight at 4 bandits," Control radioed, concern evident in the controller's voice. "Roger that, Control." "I see them," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite flying directly toward 4 enemy fighters at a combined closing speed of over 1,400 miles per hour. At the last possible moment, Sarah pulled her F-22 into a vertical climb, using her aircraft's superior thrust-to-weight ratio to execute a maneuver that caught the enemy pilots completely off guard. As she climbed past their formation, she fired 2 missiles in quick succession, targeting the trailing aircraft in the formation. Both missiles found their targets. The enemy formation, which moments before had been closing in for what they thought would be an easy kill, was suddenly reduced to 2 aircraft, their wingmen destroyed in a matter of seconds. Fox 3! Fox 3! Sarah called out, maintaining the disciplined radio procedures even in the heat of combat. 2 kills confirmed. The surviving enemy pilots tried to turn with Sarah's climbing F-22, but her maneuver had given her both an altitude and energy advantage. As they struggled to match her climb, Sarah rolled over at the top of her vertical maneuver and dove back down on them with devastating effect. Her 3rd and 4th kills came within 10 seconds of each other, her missiles tracking perfectly as the enemy aircraft tried desperately to evade. By the time the engagement was over, Sarah had eliminated an entire 4 aircraft formation in less than 2 minutes. "Raptor 1, be advised, Raptor 2 is still engaged," Control reported. Sarah immediately turned her attention to Morrison's situation. Her wingman was fighting for his life against 2 enemy aircraft that had superior position and were pressing their attack aggressively. Morrison's larger frame made him more susceptible to the effects of high-G maneuvering, and he was beginning to tire under the physical strain of combat. "Jake, I'm coming in from your 6 o'clock high," Sarah radioed. "When I call break, turn hard right and dive." Sarah positioned herself above and behind the 2 aircraft pursuing Morrison. The enemy pilots were so focused on their attack that they failed to notice the F-22 approaching from above until it was too late. "Break right, Jake, now!" Morrison executed a hard right turn and dive, just as Sarah had instructed. The maneuver put him directly out of the line of fire and gave Sarah clear shots at both enemy aircraft. Her 5th and 6th kills came as the enemy pilots realized too late that they had become the hunted rather than the hunters. "Good kill, Sarah," Morrison radioed, relief evident in his voice. "Thanks for the save." But the engagement was far from over. The remaining 4 enemy aircraft had reached the Alaskan coastline and were spreading out to attack multiple targets. Sarah could see on her radar display that they were heading toward military installations, oil facilities, and civilian population centers. Control, this is Raptor 1. I'm pursuing the remaining 4 bandits. They're splitting up to attack multiple targets. Raptor 1, backup is still 10 minutes out, Control responded. You're cleared to engage, but be advised you'll be operating alone. Sarah understood the implications. 4 enemy aircraft, each heading toward different targets, meant she would have to engage them one at a time while they tried to complete their mission. It was a tactical nightmare that would test every skill she had developed as a pilot. The first enemy aircraft was heading toward Elmendorf Air Force Base itself, probably planning to attack the runway and prevent American reinforcements from launching. Sarah caught up with it as it began its attack run, positioning herself for a shot just as the enemy pilot was lining up on his target. Her 7th kill prevented what could have been a devastating attack on American aircraft and personnel. But even as that threat was eliminated, the other 3 aircraft were continuing toward their targets. Sarah's 8th kill came as she intercepted an enemy fighter heading toward the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The enemy pilot had been so focused on his ground attack that he never saw Sarah approaching until her missile was already in the air. The 9th enemy aircraft was the most challenging. Its pilot had learned from watching his comrades destroyed and was taking evasive action while still trying to reach his target. The chase lasted for nearly 5 minutes, with both aircraft maneuvering at the limits of their performance capabilities through the mountainous terrain of southern Alaska. Sarah's smaller size proved crucial during this engagement. The high G turns required to maintain pursuit would have caused most pilots to black out or become disoriented. But Sarah's compact frame allowed her to maintain consciousness and control throughout the demanding flight profile. When she finally achieved a firing position, her 9th kill was the most satisfying of the engagement. The enemy pilot had been skilled and determined, but superior training and determination had won out. The final enemy aircraft was heading toward Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, with a population of over 300,000 people. Sarah knew that if this aircraft reached its target, the casualties could be enormous. Flying at maximum speed, Sarah closed the distance as the enemy fighter approached the outskirts of the city. The enemy pilot knew he was being pursued and was flying an unpredictable pattern to avoid being targeted. But Sarah had learned to think like her opponents, to anticipate their moves before they made them. As the enemy aircraft began its final approach toward what appeared to be the port of Anchorage, Sarah made a decision that would be debated in military circles for years afterward. Instead of waiting for a perfect shot, she maneuvered her F-22 to force the enemy pilot into a specific flight path. Using her aircraft as a weapon, Sarah positioned herself so that the enemy pilot had only one escape route if he wanted to avoid collision. When the enemy pilot took that route, he flew directly into Sarah's missile engagement envelope. Her 10th and final kill of the engagement came just 3 miles from downtown Anchorage, close enough that residents could see the explosion and debris falling into the ocean. Control, this is Raptor 1. All bandits destroyed. Threat neutralized. There was a long pause before Control responded, as if the controllers couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Raptor 1, confirm your last. Did you say all bandits destroyed? Affirmative, Control. 12 enemy aircraft destroyed. Mission accomplished. As Sarah flew back toward Elmendorf Air Force Base, the magnitude of what had just occurred began to sink in. She had just achieved something unprecedented in modern aerial warfare. A single pilot had eliminated 12 enemy aircraft in a single engagement while protecting multiple high-value targets. The landing at Elmendorf was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. As her F-22 taxied back to the flight line, she could see crowds of people gathered near the operations building. Ground crews, fellow pilots, base personnel, and even civilians who had somehow learned about the engagement were waiting to see the pilot who had just saved potentially thousands of lives. Colonel Rodriguez was the first to reach Sarah as she climbed down from her aircraft. His expression showed a mixture of pride, amazement, and something that might have been relief. "Chen, what you just did," Rodriguez began, then stopped, apparently unable to find the right words. "I just did my job, sir," Sarah replied, though she knew that wasn't entirely accurate. What she had done went far beyond anyone's expectations of what a single pilot could accomplish. Within hours, news of the engagement had reached the highest levels of the military and government. General Patricia Hayes, the same general who had supported Sarah's assignment to the F-22 program, called personally to congratulate her. "Captain Chen, you've just redefined what we think is possible in aerial combat," Hayes said during their conversation. "More importantly, you've probably prevented an international crisis that could have led to a much larger conflict." The investigation that followed revealed that the enemy aircraft had been part of a coordinated strike intended to cripple American military capabilities in Alaska, while simultaneously attacking civilian targets to create maximum psychological impact. The attack had been planned for months and was intended to demonstrate that American airspace was not as secure as the public believed. Sarah's actions had not only prevented the attack, but had done so in a way that sent a clear message to potential adversaries. The United States Air Force was capable of defending American territory with devastating effectiveness. The awards and recognition that followed were unprecedented. Sarah received the Medal of Honor, making her one of the youngest recipients in modern history. But more than the awards, what mattered to Sarah was the change in how she was perceived by her colleagues and the military establishment. The whispers about her size had stopped completely. No one questioned whether she belonged in the cockpit of an F-22. No one doubted her capabilities or suggested that her success was somehow due to luck or circumstances. Instead, Sarah found herself being asked to help train other pilots, to share her tactical knowledge, and to serve as an example of what was possible when skill and determination were combined with proper training and preparation. 6 months after the engagement, Sarah received a letter from a 12-year-old girl in Montana who had read about her story in the newspaper. The letter was simple but powerful. "Dear Captain Chen, I want to be a pilot like you when I grow up. My teacher said I might be too small, but I told her that you were small too and you saved a whole city. Thank you for showing me that dreams can come true if you work hard enough." Reading that letter, Sarah remembered her father's words from all those years ago. Size doesn't matter in the cockpit. What matters is how well you can think, how fast you can react, and how much heart you put into it. She had proven those words true in the most dramatic way possible. But more than that, she had shown that the limitations people place on others often say more about their own lack of imagination than about what is actually possible. Today, Captain Sarah Chen's engagement over the Aleutian Islands is studied in military academies around the world as an example of tactical excellence, situational awareness, and the importance of individual skill in modern warfare. Her achievement stands as proof that in the cockpit of an advanced fighter aircraft, physical size matters far less than the size of a pilot's courage, skill, and determination. The F-22 Raptor that Sarah flew that day is now on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, with a plaque that reads, "Flown by Captain Sarah Chen during the defense of Alaska, March 15, 2024. 12 enemy aircraft destroyed in a single engagement, a testament to American air power and the courage of those who serve." But for Sarah, the most important legacy of that day is the message it sends to anyone who has ever been told they're too small, too different, or too unlikely to achieve their dreams. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest heart.